Thank you very much. Have your coffee, your dessert if it's served, but we thought in the interest of time we would get some introductions taken care of. Towards the end of the evening we'll be giving the mic to our guest of honor, and I'm not sure how long that will take, so we want to sort of take care of a few things right now. I'm going to introduce the I'm going to introduce the wives of the roasters. As I call their name, will they please stand, and would you hold your applause, and maybe you can give them a hand when they're all introduced. First, I present to you Jane Sanders, wife of Congressman Bernie Sanders. Jane? Patricia Shea, wife of Attorney Charles Shea. Pat, where are you? If you'll hold your applause, and then we'll give everybody one big hand. Okay? I might have said that, but that's okay. Dee Pomerleau, wife of Ernie Pomerleau, one of our roasters. Dee? That's okay. Do whatever you want. Hey! Eileen Sonic, wife of Commander John Sonic. Eileen? Well, whatever. My wife, Sandra. Sonny, where are you? Yeah. And I'm especially delighted, and really it's a privilege for me, it's something I will tell my kids later, tomorrow and the next day, that I had the opportunity to present to you Susan Brinkley, wife of our guest of honor, David Brinkley. Susan? And I thought it only be proper that we present to you the Pomerleau family as a whole bunch, so it'll take a minute. So, first, he just came in from Chicago. Dennis Pomerleau. Dennis, are you there? Wherever. Grace Pomerleau, you'll be seeing more of Grace. Well, she'll be doing something up there later. Yes, Grace, nice to see you. She was in Ridgewood, New Jersey this morning. I guess she came in late today. Susan P. Corky, Susan Pomerleau Corky. Where are you, Susan? Okay. We will. Anne-Marie Pomerleau Joyce. Anne-Marie, who... And Elizabeth Pomerleau Mays. Elizabeth? Alice Pomerleau Waxler. Alice, are you close by? Rosemary, you had the camera, I guess. Rosemary Pomerleau, right there. And just in from Beantown, Patricia Pomerleau. Pat, where are you? And a lady that maybe one day will be canonized, or beatified, one thing, she'll get a medal or something, and I'll tell you more about that later, but the mother of all the Pomerleaus and the wife of our guest of honor, Rita Pomerleau. Rita? Thank you. Everybody here is a very special person, and I'm sincere when I tell you that. But there are two people we thought you might like to have us introduce to you. The mayor of the city of Burlington, I believe, is here. Mayor Peter Brownell. Peter, where are you? And our guest of honor has a close association with St. Michael's College, and I believe their president is here, President Paul Rice. President Rice. and everybody else that's here, we are delighted. At this juncture in our program, before we get to what we would refer to as the real fun part, the part that I've waited for, I'd like to present the chairman of MS, Ted Winfield. Ted has been on the board for 7 years. He's been their chairman for 3 years. He also serves on a national board to improve and help in the work that MS does. And to earn his living, he's assistant dean at the University of Vermont College of Medicine. So would you welcome Ted Winfield, please?
Joe, thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to welcome you all here tonight. This is the first annual National Multiple Sclerosis Society Dinner of Champions Roast, and we're really privileged to have Tony Pomerleau as our honoree. Well, I don't know what your sense is from down there, but up here I have the feeling that there's a fair amount of flame and smoke yet to come. So before we get on with that, I thought it would be helpful to spend just a moment with you and give you a little bit of background about the National MS Society and about what we're doing here in Vermont. Multiple sclerosis is a disease of the central nervous system. At this point, there's no clear understanding of what causes MS, and therefore no clear understanding of how to cure MS. The National Multiple Sclerosis Society was formed in 1946 and is now made up of about 78 chapters around the country. Our Vermont chapter is one of the smaller chapters, but we feel one of the more effective given the size of our community and what we're able to do. And I think your presence in this evening is a good representation of that effectiveness. The mission of the National Society is to help to find a cure for MS. And as a result, much of the work that is done on a national basis focuses on detailed scientific research. Over the course of the last 35 years, the Society nationally has funded more than $170 million of research activity. The budget this last year is about $12 million, and over the course of the last 10 years, about $620,000 worth of research was focused here in Vermont at the University of Vermont College of Medicine. In Vermont, in our local chapter, we try to focus most heavily on service, and service to people in Vermont who may have MS or who may be affected by MS. We offer peer counseling for folks who are newly diagnosed. We run support groups. I hope a few of you had a chance to see the newsletter that we publish. We feel it's a very good and informative source of information about the disease and what its impact may be. We're also actively involved in dealing with disability issues, disability rights, disability awareness. So there's a lot to do. We also conduct a series of fundraising activities. You may have been involved or seen some of those. The next one is in February, the MS ski spree. It's at Sugarbush, great deal of fun. We also are involved in a walk in April and a bike event in July. And the annual MS Regatta really caps the racing season on the lake at the end of the summer at Labor Day weekend. And now we can add, I think, an important new event, a Dinner of Champions, to those activities to help raise money for the work that we're trying to do. One of the things that I feel like about an evening like this is it really is a function of the ability of people getting things done. And so I'd like to take just a quick moment and recognize a few folks who are here, some of the other members of the board, and then have an opportunity to meet and introduce to you a special guest that we've asked to join us. Elaine Shirillo, Margaret Naylor, Courtney Walthour, Leslie Dunn, who's our executive director. Those are the 4 people that really make the organization run. If they could raise their hands around in the audience someplace, if you could give a hand. We have a very active board. John Dwyer, Tim Duff, Deneen Nolette, Marley Skiff, Les Szabo, Lee Van Winkle, Cece Wick, Ken Wolvington. Those are all people who are here this evening, some names you may know. And importantly, thank you. Importantly, I didn't mention one board member who is here and who has really a special needs special recognition tonight, and that's Craig Austin. Craig really has been the spearhead on our board to coordinate and organize this entire event, and he and his associates at Triad Design have really done a super job. Craig, thanks so much. You're really excellent. As I said, it's really personal connections that help to accomplish events like this. So what I'd like to do is really build on what I know to be the personal connections that Tony and his family have brought, and for whom we really are very grateful for the support of this evening. And I want you to know that as a result of your being here and the work that's done, we've raised in excess of $40,000 that will help support the work we're doing here in Vermont. So my hat's off to all of you. One of the things I'd like to do, multiple sclerosis is not a disease that many people are aware of or know a great deal about. But if I could, I'd like folks in the audience and anyone here at the podium who has a personal connection, who has a family member, who has a friend, who has a work associate, who has a good acquaintance, a relative who has MS, please just raise your hand. Let's see what the connections are. And I imagine if you look down the row or around the table, you'll see a whole series of folks that you may not know have this particular connection. So as we do our work, we like to build on those things and try to take advantage of the person-to-person activities. And I think that's really what this evening is all about, is recognizing personal connections. Now, we have a very special guest with us this evening, Lorraine Eager, who has joined us. Lorraine, can you please come and be available to make your comments? With the aid of her doctor, Dr. John Disson, Lorraine is really here by sort of special dispensation this evening. She's been a patient at the medical center for some time now, and happily is about to end her stay there. She's an active member of the MS support group in Rutland. She's a board member of the Bennington Rutland Opportunity Council. She's been an active volunteer at the Rutland Hospital and area nursing homes. We'd like Lorraine to spend just a moment to tell you a little bit about the disease, about MS, and about the impact that MS can have on a particular person's life. Lorraine?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out and helping the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. Without it, I'd be in bad shape without having a lot of things that they've offered me and given me. My MS has hit me pretty hard this time. Today is my 50th day I've spent at the hospital right up the road, and I'm happy to say I'm being discharged on Friday to go home for physical therapy in Rutland. And just so you know, MS does not hit people, the few of the people that do know anything about MS. And I have to admit that the pamphlet that was given out, the booklet, gives you a great detail, and I hope that everyone takes that with you and reads it just to understand MS a little bit more. It is not a contagious disease. It is a frightening disease for the people who have it, and also for the people who love people who have it, to be honest with you. It may not come like this. Unfortunately, mine has brought me into a wheelchair. My doctors say I probably will be in here for a very long time. I'm probably going to get out of it in 2 years. With my determination, I've gotten out of it before. I've had to have an operation due to my MS, but just so you know, multiple sclerosis can affect very minor. You can have tingling in your fingers, in your feet, blurriness in your eyes, and never have another symptom after that. It may not bother you after that. You can lead a very normal life. Unfortunately, my life has been sidetracked. I cannot work anymore. I can't hold a job down anymore. So I do the volunteering, as Ted was saying. I feel that I can give back what I can by volunteering, by doing things for the needy, for the handicapped, or physically challenged, as we like to call ourselves at times. I work at nursing homes, and I also volunteer at hospitals. I do what I can, and feel that I can give back for what you have given to me by giving us the money in order to help try to find a cure for MS. Mr. Pomerleau had said in an interview in the Free Press that he would never want to be anybody else. I wouldn't want to be anybody else either. I wouldn't want to be anybody else but me. I wouldn't want anyone else to have this disease. I wouldn't give this away if I could. I deal with this. This is my life, and I learned how to deal with this, and I do the best that I can with it. And I also learned to have fun with it. And we just did have fun out in the, if you could see. Less than I did a wheelie on the way in. But you learn to have fun with what you can. And I just want to thank you all very, very much. It's very important to me that a lot of you have given your time and money in order to help find a cure for it, because I don't want kids being born with this disease. As polio has a vaccine, I would like to have multiple sclerosis have a vaccine so that nobody has to be put through this, because this is not a fun disease. But I'd like to thank everyone again, and I hope you have a great time. And thank you very much for inviting me.
Lorraine, thank you so much, and I hope as the evening progresses, the roasting, you can feel it percolating up here, that I hope you'll be able to connect with us at some time in the future. There really are an awful lot of important things to do, and I hope we'll be seeing a number of you in other contexts in the future. Thank you so much, and let the roast begin.
Lorraine, if the evening stopped right now, I think most of us would feel that it's been a marvelous evening and we learned something. Thank you very much. I really want to get you to understand a little bit about our guest of honor. So I'll try to tell you some things, actual happenings in our life. The Pomerleaus live in the summertime at Apple Tree Point, and they really have a lovely place. And a number of years ago, when I first got to meet Tony, he invited us down to his place, and the sun was shining, the sky was blue, and the lake was shimmering, and my wife is kind of a bashful girl, and she said, "It's certainly a beautiful day, Mr. Pomerleau." And Tony said, "Thank you very much." That was our first visit. I asked Rita, I said, "Rita, with all the success that Tony's enjoyed in business, in his community, with a lovely family, a lovely wife, and he's still physically good looking, and he's a pretty good golfer, especially if he keeps score. And with all this going for him, has he had a hard job keeping his head screwed on right?" She said, "Do you mean, has he ever had to see a psychiatrist?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "He saw him once." And I said, "Did the visit go well?" She said, "Well, the psychiatrist said, if I'm going to help you, Mr. Pomerleau, you're going to have to tell me everything right from the beginning." And Tony said, "In the beginning, I made the heavens and the earth." You may not know this, but this is true. I'm not making it up. 3 days ago, Tony and Rita celebrated their 48th wedding anniversary. Yes, you can clap. One of their reasons, I think the main reason for their success in this 48 years, is they both have a strong belief in the same God, who happens to be Tony. Somebody told me, and I don't believe it, it is not my line, but somebody told me that you could take all the humility that Tony Pomerleau has and put it in a flea's navel and still have room for a carry-away seat in your mother-in-law's heart. I said, "Thank you. They'll get better, I hope." I hope so. Oh, you got it.
I hope so.
I asked Tony, I said, you had a big family, you philosophize a great deal, tell me something about your life. And this is just a while ago. Well, he says, Joe, you know, I happen to be Catholic. And he says, we've been taught two things, rhythm and bingo. And he said, if the rhythm doesn't work, it's bingo. In a roast, you're supposed to say something bad about a guy, but I can't say anything bad about him. I'm not sure that he's able to do anything bad, but he did used to, and this is true. Tony used to subscribe to Playboy. And again, I'm not knocking Playboy, but depending on your own opinion about that magazine, it's changed radically in the last few years. So Rita made him cancel that subscription. She said, you might just as well get National Geographic. She said, they're both filled with interesting places you're never going to visit. He also said he lives, when they were in Italy, they visited a winery, and he said there was an Italian slogan that's had some kind of an impact on their lives, and I've shared it with a lot of groups, and I think it's pretty good. It says, the family drink of the vino together, have a bambino together. And he also plans a lot. You might not know this, but Rita's credit cards were stolen about 4 weeks ago. That's true. Tony still hasn't reported it to the police. He said he figures the thieves are spending less than she would. If you've seen their home, they have a 3-car garage and a loading zone. Tony, this may please you because I wanted you to know we were inundated with requests for people that wanted to be roasters, and I want you to know how popular you are. And these requests came from your employees, they came from your tenants, they came from your 2 friends, and they of course came from your family. In fact, Nancy said something, and I don't want to get her in trouble. I think her job is secure. Nancy's been Tony's secretary for over 20 years. And Nancy told, where's Nancy? There, she's right there. Nice to see you, Nancy. She told me that Tony Pomerleau is one of the few people she met that can light up a room just by leaving it. We were going to have a lot of people, but we didn't have time, but we'll get into this. We have seven roasters, and our first really needs very little introduction. He is not only the governor of our state, but for those of you that don't know, and I think it's a tremendous tribute, the polls have said that he is the most popular governor in our United States. Isn't that great? I'm supposed to say something a little different about everybody's going to be a roaster. How do you say something about a guy like that? Except one thing. In the Free Press last week, you might have read it. I don't know if it's true, but he is a speeder for whatever it's worth, allegedly or what. You saw that, Governor. I'm sorry, but I did have to bring it out. He weaves in and out of traffic and so forth. Well, no, I'm not going to read this. Jim Carrey had it in their nice paper. Speedy governor. So Governor Dean, how are you going to try out for Indy? This is too long. I've been commuting from Essex to Montpelier daily for the last 3 years. There's a car that frequently passes me at high speed. Meanwhile, it is weaving in and out of traffic, cutting people off, and basically ignoring the rules of the road. She goes on and on and on. But it's just, I don't think it's true. It's somebody that... Now, there was a rebuttal to that, because she even says 5 minutes later, she saw him do it again, and the rebuttal in the Free Press, and this is true, said, if he was going that fast, what were you doing 5 minutes later right behind him? Something you didn't know, Governor Howard Dean, when he was Dr. Howard Dean, and of course still is, a long time ago was interested in the quality of life. This is true. You don't have to laugh, that's true. One of Burlington's pride and joys is the bike path. I think you'll all agree. He probably, because he was on the Citizens Waterfront Committee, and much to the dismay of one of the associates of a fellow roaster, he succeeded in getting the bike path through. And if he did nothing else for Burlington, what a tremendous, tremendous accomplishment. Will you please give Governor Howard Dean a warm welcome?
I can tell it's going to be a long night with Joe at the wheel. You know, this is a very, very impressive thing. So the organizer of the dinner came up to me and said, gee, you know, we were expecting 300 people, but we have well over 400 people here. And I said, Tony, it's nice you have a big family. Tony Pomerleau is still at it. By the way, Tony, Dick Thyssen and Frank Burke said you play a great game of golf. They're two of his buddies down in Florida. I ran into them last night in Boston. Tony broke 80 the last time they played. I don't know, what'd you get in the next 9 holes, Tony? 80. And I did see the minority leader the other day when I was on one of my trips to Washington. And he, as you know, is a good friend of Tony's. And he said that I should be sure to compliment you on your modesty. And he wanted to ride on your 54-room boat. It said 54 feet in the free press, but if you've ever seen it, it's 54 rooms, because I saw it tied up at Ray Pecor's dock the other day. Tony took me through every one of them and showed me the gold fixtures in the bathroom, and if you don't believe me. Tony Pomerleau is an amazing guy, and he's still at it. About 2 weeks ago, I got a phone call. Now, Tony Pomerleau has been extremely successful in life. He has every right to retire, to live in Florida, to enjoy himself. Each of those 54 rooms, Tony. He calls me up. I'm sitting at my desk. Will you take a call from Tony Pomerleau? Of course you take a call from Tony Pomerleau. If you don't, you're down in 400 votes in the next election, right? So, he says, Howard, I've just bought a shopping center. I said, what? He said, it was a shopping center I started. I couldn't resist. It was a bargain price. It was less than it cost me to build it 20 years ago. I need your help. I need your help. You got to get it through the permit process. Tony, I'm not going to say how old you are. And I'm not going to say anything bad about the permit process. We were otherwise having a lovely evening. But this is an interesting proposition for a guy who's retired. There's no such thing as retirement for Tony Pomerleau. Let me just tell you, this is vintage Tony. I got to know Tony and Ernie and some of the other people at this table 12, 14 years ago, as Joe said, by helping to kill one of his projects on the waterfront. I'm laughing now, but there goes 400 votes. Tony, for those of you who may remember, there were 4 square, 10-story buildings slated to go down right about where the boathouse is right now. And that was the Pomerleau project, one of sort of a long series of projects. And I was interested in the waterfront. We were trying to make a deal. And Bernie Sanders was yet a gleam in the eye of Gordon Paquette at that time. And I just have to read a little piece from a publication which I'm sure is defunct now, May 1st, 1982, called That Paper in the North Burlington News. And it says, Joe Handy, long a statewide force in Republican politics, teamed up with Del Martin, Gardner Briggs, and Judy Stephanie to talk to everybody in the legislature. It says, Dean said, I called Joe Handy at 7 o'clock in the morning, and by 7:30 he had dropped his entire day's schedule, was in the car heading for Montpelier. He saved the whole project. Of course, Joe wanted me to read that. Then it says that Clark Gravel is really going to have a tough row to hoe proving this is unconstitutional. It's Charlie Shea's law partner. I don't remember if Kevin was the chief of police there, but I think he was. Were you? In 1982? No, not me. Well, it seems like you were. Bernie Sanders was ultimately the mayor who put through the bike path, and Tony and Ernie, having started off by getting us all excited about the waterfront, were very supportive of it. So the purpose of my telling that little story is that what you see up here is a lot of different people who've had a lot of fights and worked hard together for the last 10 or 12 years on in a lot of different areas. And I think what makes Tony Pomerleau stand out is the people who are up here are the people who are basically people that he likes and we like him. And he likes us, I think, because we're straight shooters, and we like him because he is the ultimate straight shooter. Tony Pomerleau, for all his success and all his wealth and all of his 54 rooms on that yacht, still makes his friends because his friends are straight shooters. His friends are people, and it isn't because of their wealth or their station in life or anything else like that. And it was typical of Tony Pomerleau to say, Burlington can't get their police station through. I was in the police commission for 17 years. I'm going to get it done. And on November 8th, it's going to get done. And we thank you, Tony, in advance for that. But we're really here to thank you. We're going to have a lot of fun embarrassing you at your expense. But I at least wanted to say that Tony Pomerleau has done an unbelievable amount for this state. And it's really fun to get up here and tease him and give him the business. But there are a lot of people in this audience and on the front table and all over the state that are a lot better off because of 70-odd years of great generosity and great support for the state of Vermont. And Tony, for that, we really thank you.
There's a gospel passage in the church that I worship at, and I will quote it exactly in its entirety, because it's only one line. It says that it'll be easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get to heaven. Now, those of you that go to Catholic Church know that is an actual passage. Our next roaster, Congressman Bernard Sanders, has pledged his life to assist Tony in gaining eternal salvation. And you know how he's going to do it. That went off so good. I won't push it, except that I worked with Tony on the police station when he was pardon me, he should have been the chief of police, because we'll tell you more about that later. But when he was police commissioner, and I saw different mayors, but I don't believe, and I am as sincere as I can be, that anyone had a better rapport than Tony did with Bernie, or Bernie with Tony, and yet they may have been 360 degrees apart on income tax, minimum wage, estate taxes, or what have you. But they did know that working together they could get things done. And even to this day, that respect and admiration has stayed. Whether you're for Bernie Sanders or you're against him, and I've been involved in politics about a quarter of a century in the background, ward chairman, stuff like that, I don't believe I've met anyone, Democrat, independent, progressive, Republican, or what, has had such a profound effect on those that vote. He got more people involved in the political system, and for that we owe him a great debt. Would you please give a warm welcome to Congressman Bernard Sanders.
Thank you very much. Joe, I'm going to put that in the paper as an endorsement. Let me begin by picking up on a point that the governor just mentioned, and that is the waterfront project that many of us have been involved in. And I think As you all know, I was elected mayor of Burlington in 1981 by 10 votes. And I think that after 13 years later, it is appropriate to tell the truth about the campaign and how it happened and how I won. I think Tony would agree that 13 years is enough time to let the secrets out in the open. So we're going to be honest with you tonight, tell you how we pulled off that election. I had decided to run in late 1980, and we knew that it was going to be a very difficult race. We were running against a 5-term incumbent and so forth, who today remains a very good friend of mine. And we figured we needed a real theme for that campaign. It was going to be a really tough race. And Tony and I sat down and we said, Tony, we're going to need something for me to really run against. We're going to need something so outrageous, so cockamamie, something that nobody in Burlington can possibly agree with, and I'm going to run against that. And Tony managed to get some architects together. At great personal expense, I should tell you. And as the governor indicated, he came up with the most absurd, outrageous plan. He came up with these outrageous condos, expensive enclaves for the wealthy, shopping centers, the most horrendous project that anyone could imagine. And now we have to tell you it was all a joke. And as you all know, we ran against that project, and probably most of you can't see it, but this was one of the posters we put out during that campaign. It said, Burlington is not for sale, and here in Burlington is for sale Pomerleau Real Estate Company. And Tony, I think you played a major role in my political career, and I did want to give you this poster.
I really need this.
Tony just indicated he really needs this. It'll bring back fond memories, no doubt. As Joe mentioned, Tony and I really had a very interesting and positive relationship in Burlington city government. And some of my memories are as follows. As some of you may know, despite claims to the contrary, Tony Pomerleau did not graduate Harvard Business School. It is not true. And yet all of us know him to be a very brilliant business person and a very, very quick mind. And I saw that one night at about 1 o'clock in the morning when several businessmen, whose names I will not mention, but wheelers and dealers in the city of Burlington, Tony and I and the city treasurer, then Jonathan Leopold, were together talking about city affairs. And at about 1 o'clock in the morning, Tony's mind went to work with these unfortunate fellows who were graduates of business school and started to explain to them the reality of life and what a profit margin was. And these guys were sitting there dumbfounded as he was rattling off figures and telling them how, in fact, they could make money. And I was very impressed. And I was also very impressed, and in fact, the people of Burlington will be forever grateful for the work Tony did on the ill-fated trash burning plant in the Intervale. That project equaled Tony's, except that was not Tony's project. Tony helped us kill that project. But in terms of merit, it equaled the waterfront development project. It was a disaster. The problem, as some of you may remember at that time, is that any idea that I brought forward immediately got 11 no's on the city council. So we had to figure out a way to possibly convince the city council to reject that proposal. And we brought in Tony and some other people, business community people, who did a wonderful job informing the city council that the price of fossil fuel had dropped precipitously, that we would lose our shirts and it would be an environmental disaster for the city of Burlington. And Tony played a very, very important role on that project and helped us defeat it for the everlasting gratitude of the people of the city. Unfortunately, however, Tony paid a price. Tony's relationship with me has not been an easy one. He's always paying a price. First, his waterfront project goes down, and then when he does the right thing, by working with the Sanders administration, all of his friends in the Republican and Democratic Party suddenly desert him. So we had the most remarkable experience. I always believed that Tony did an outstanding job as police commissioner. But the closer Tony came to working with our administration, the more and more the Democrats and Republicans on the city council moved away from him. So we had the rather remarkable circumstance that in one evening when in Burlington we elect all of the commissioners, Tony Pomerleau, probably to his everlasting shame, was elected by the socialists on the city council, not by the Democrats or the Republicans. And I remember also some years back, and I think we've made some good improvements there, at one of the low-income housing projects, there was a period where there was just a lot of problems and a lot of violence and so forth and so on. And Tony, you'll remember that you and I were there at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning sitting around trying to prevent the violence that took place. So here you had one of the wealthiest people in the state of Vermont at 2 o'clock in the morning sitting with me at a low-income housing project trying to prevent violence, and I think we were successful on that night. Let me just close in a way that I think the governor did very appropriately, to point out that there is a reason why so many people are here tonight. And there is a reason why Tony has so many friends and is such a beloved member of this community. The truth is, Tony remembers where he came from. And he came a long, hard path to be where he is today. But unlike many other people in his position, he remembers. And he knows what it's like to not have money. And he knows what it's like to go through some very tough times. And Tony and I worked very well. I would come up with the ideas, and he came up with the money. And together we did some really nice things. We have, as some of you may know, and I know the Pomerleau family has been active in this for so many years, put on a wonderful Christmas party for low-income people in Burlington every Christmas, and it's a wonderful program that Tony and his family fund. And it is no secret, I think, to anybody in this room that Tony Pomerleau is a soft touch. And that means that when people come to him who are in trouble, when institutions come to him who need funding, he's there. He gives back what he has received, and that is the sign of a very, very great and wonderful person. I think after all is said and done about Tony, I think what we can say is, in Yiddish there's an expression called a mensch, which means not just a man, but a real human being, somebody with a heart, somebody with a soul, somebody who knows how to love and to share. So I would simply say, as the former mayor of the city, as the congressman today, it's been an honor and a pleasure for me to know Tony and his family, to work with him, and to say that we are very blessed and honored by his presence in our community. Tony, thanks.
I think you're in for a very special treat right now. Our next roasters are our police chief, Kevin Scully, and his #1 assistant, Commander John Sonic. The only thing about them that kind of troubles me is we don't like moonlighting, and when the chief and the commander moonlight, I'm not sure that sets the proper stage. For your information, Kevin Scully is a part-time embalmer, and John Sonic sings at funerals. No, I'm telling you the truth. That's true. And if you believe this, or you don't have to, but the chief says he finds embalming relaxing after a stressful day at the police station. What they have in common, and you did mention, Congressman Sanders, that Tony was out there because he was showing them, and this is true, I served on the commission then, he was showing the cops how to do their job. And both the chief and the commander will tell you all of the intricate details that they've learned about police work. apprehending a criminal, reading him his rights and how to handle it. You know who they learned it from? I'll tell you sometime. I don't want to right now. They're both outstanding policemen. Other communities pattern their training programs on ours. Other communities borrow them to go down and conduct training sessions at the schools. We're very proud and very lucky to have both of them. Will you give a warm welcome to Chief Kevin Scully and Commander John Sonnet?
Joe, thank you very much. John gets nervous at these occasions, and so he just had to step away for a few moments, but I'm sure he'll be right back. And Joe, you've done a swell job at organizing this diaz and bringing this body of people together. I've got to tell you, I'm just looking at Ernie here just for a minute. I thought I was the second youngest. I think I'm the third youngest, but this is an undertaker's dream up here. Let me tell you. By the way, I hope you were all paying attention when you came in tonight. Gene Sensi and Gary Farrell were out front, and they looked like a pair of undertakers at Frankie Campbell's on Madison Avenue, New York. I told Gene for this crowd he should have charged for parking out back. Now, Tony, you know, I would have never guessed in this 24-year association together that we would come to an evening and a time when you would be sitting where you're sitting and I would have control of the podium. That in fact I would be able to spend a few moments speaking, I hope eloquently about you without being interrupted. And I want to remind you that it wasn't too many years ago now, let's see, well, we do go back a way. It must have been at least 11 years ago when you and I were at City Council together and I had 19 points to make to that body of people. And you snapped the microphone away from me at point number 9. If you try to take the microphone tonight, I'm sticking it in my pocket, so you can't have it. Tony, over these years, I've watched you baffle clergymen and politicians and everyone in between. You're the only guy I know that have 2 monsignors in this diocese arguing over who's going to be in care of your soul, and the only way they can ever measure it is by the weight of the basket on Sunday. Nonetheless, you managed to go to 2 churches and torment these 2 men to an absolute point of distraction. Politicians are no less tormented by you. I've watched you go through the hybrid explanation of financial planning. And I've watched our congressman, when he was mayor, have his eyes would just grow. They would be as big as saucers. And when you take out the 3 coconut shells and tell him if he could find the pea under any one of them, he could have the money, that was enough to really stop a freight train in full motion. Of course, what no one never knew is that you never had a pea under any of the shells. Certainly, we all recognize the notable contribution that you have made to the Burlington Police Department and the men and women of the Burlington Police Department over the years that you not only served as commissioner, but over these years that you have just been a wonderfully close friend of all of us. So, Tony, I want you to know, first of all, I still carry with me the photograph that you insisted that we all have when we were out on patrol. We had to carry this in our attaché cases. I still have my photograph, Tony, and you can't have it back. You know, you did run an efficient meeting. We were always amazed at that time of year when the commission would have to be reorganized. And not only did you serve 17 years on the commission, you were also chairman of that commission for 17 years. And it went something like this. Mr. Pomerleau would come into the chief's office where the meeting would be held. Joe Handy, Tommy Crowley, Johnny Burns, and I forget who else was on the commission at the time, would all be gathered together. Mr. Pomerleau would sit down and he'd say, "Gentlemen, it's time to elect the chair." He said, "I'll take a nomination." Tom Crowley would nominate Tony Pomerleau. It would be seconded. Tony would say, "Nominations are now closed." Joe would be hollering, "I want to make another nomination. I want to make another nomination." Handy, be quiet. We'll now have a vote. Please vote. Everybody votes. Yay. Okay, I'm the chair. I want to thank you very much for all that you've done for me. It was democracy at a new level. Now, you know, David Brinkley shared with all of us some of his insight about you, and he called you a creator. Well, you sure are a creator of havoc. You've been raising havoc with these girls since they've been little. You get them out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning so that you can braid their hair. You owe them a big one. You're the only person that's ever been on the commission from whose place of business I truly believe these calls come from. I get secret calls. Chief, is there anything that you have at police headquarters that you can keep busy, that you can keep Tony busy with for this week? That happens on average, I'd say, probably about twice a month. You really did it this week, though, Tony. You really did it this week. Sure enough, Sunday, October 16th, front page of the Burlington Free Press. There you are, elevated above the city, the whole city in the background, your arms spread. You're mimicking the good Lord himself. You look like you're on the mountain at Rio de Janeiro. And by the way, I have it on good authority, the Pope is mad at you. But at any rate, it can't be. It can't be. It's the other Tony Pomerleau. Oh no. Listen, you're going to take the microphone. I just know you are. Take the microphone. Go ahead.
I just want to thank all my friends. You finally get it right. You finally come, nice party, come to my party. Very, very nice. You know, and Joe Handy, where I want to take you. You picking up a check. Very, very good. You know, I tell you a story. Many years ago, I told, someone asked me, he said, you have a choice of being Moses, moving river and all of that, or you be Tony Pomerleau. I be Tony Pomerleau. No question. Absolutely. And I want to thank, not only Joe, but this guy right here. I mean, he a handsome guy. He looks just like me.
Now, Mr. P, no one knows better of your generosity and the latest effort that you have undertaken to secure a new police headquarters. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, that's true. I talked with Pat and Bernie and Howard and many people. And, we have problem because, progressive with the Democrat and in a battle, I take care of everything.
Now, Mr. P, we know that you have been absolutely instrumental in any number of other great initiatives, restoring buildings, constructing buildings. What's the latest? What's the latest project?
That's very true. But besides police department, not too long ago, a friend called to me from Italy. He say I have building it lean a little, so I say, no problem, I get boy, and we finish right, we get right straightened up. And then Monsignor called me not too long ago, and he say, Pope on the line for you. So I take the Pope, I say Pope, and he said, Tony. I say, yeah, what your problem? And he say, well, I have this chapel, need painting. I said, no problem. He said, I paint by numbers. No, we take good care.
Now, Mr. P, we know that you have gone to a lot of effort to save the Sea View Hotel down in Bal Harbor, Florida, there around Miami. It's a terrible crime area, I know, but you've saved that hotel.
That very true, Chief. A beautiful hotel, and of course, many famous. You know, we have the O'Neill Tipper, and we also, you know, Hillary called me the other day, and she said, you know, I need reservation. I said, Hillary, we booked, so you know. And by the way, Brinkley, your rent due. I don't want to say anything, but Dan Rather, he put money up front, and so either you pay by 31st or you out.
Now, Tony, I just want to share really what will be a second to last thought with you here. You know, there's no question that we're on a fast track and a sure track to a new police headquarters. And I was just recently thinking in the office that after the November 8th ballot and we have the votes in and we're ready to go ahead in June when we have that opening day ceremony. Of course, you'll be there. And, absolutely. I was thinking I was going to have a bronze done of myself as the original officer friendly. You don't think that would?
Chief, you're a very friendly officer. I understand that, but you know, I already give you model chief for a statue. And it looked very nice, and you can be right next to me, you know, a little statue. So I'd just like to thank you, once again, thank all my friends for a wonderful party. And once again, Joe, we're going to turn over to you, the handy Joe. And Joe, after this all over, you come see me tomorrow, because I think you're going to be selling a shoe.
Tony. Tony. John and I have a lot of fun getting this stuff ready. We can't wait to do it again sometime. There are a few other things we wanted to do, but we also wanted to be sensitive to this very special group of people that have been gathered here tonight. I do want to share, though, with you, Tony, from my heart of hearts, as a citizen, as a police officer, as the individual currently on the watch responsible for all of those things that need to be done in the field of law enforcement and the care of community. And that is to say to you, it is with a great sense of gratitude and appreciation for all that you are and all that you have done, not only on a community-wide basis, but for all of us as police officers. Your unyielding support and your unwavering friendship has always been apparent to us, and is apparent to us in these weeks now as we wait to get to a November ballot and hopefully secure a new police headquarters. But there is a whole litany of other kindnesses that you have been a part of, things that you would have known of because of your association with us, and people that you've reached out to care for and touch in a special way that probably not another person in this room knows about, only because of those kinds of things that we have had the opportunity to do together. It is usual and customary that I receive the salute of men and women in the office that I hold. It is of respect. Tony, I offer my personal salute to you and that of every single one of us who serve the public for that which you have done. It's my wish for you that no matter where it is you go, no matter how far you have to travel, that you always return home safely and that you're always held in the protective hollow of the good Lord's palm. Tony, thank you.
Heck of a job. Nice going. Jeepers. You got me all misty for a minute, Kevin. That was great. And John, terrific. Absolutely terrific. There's a bit of trivia I'm going to share with you that has nothing to do with the program, and it will not be of interest to you, but it is to me, and as the roastmaster, I can take that time. I never thought, I graduated from a high school in Montpelier in 1947, a small Catholic high school, St. Michael's. They had Sisters of Mercy, and they were very proud of it. And I never knew that 40 or 45 or 50 years later, at one side would be a prominent attorney who graduated a year after I did, and a little bit to my left, someone that I'm going to introduce now that happens to be a United States Senator, because the three of us all attended that same school. And I thought that's a bit of trivia that... And Senator Pat, don't you think the nuns would tonight, they would be really feeling great, wouldn't they?
I'm not sure.
Senator Pat Leahy doesn't need really any introduction in this room, but only to give you a couple, three of his highlights. When he was our county state's attorney, the National District Attorneys Association named him one of the 3 most outstanding prosecutors. That's true. He had some help from the Free Press, but basically that is a true statement. Secondly, I didn't know this, but it was brought to my attention, but it is a true statement. He's a Democrat, you got to remember that. He cut billions of previously wasted dollars out of the foreign aid budget and from the United States Department of Agriculture. That's true. Really, he did that. Well, if he'd been a Republican, he'd have got twice that much, but that's... And because he's from Montpelier and Burlington, he spent hours and hours in protecting Lake Champlain and its tributaries. I'm just honored to present him to you. Give a warm welcome to Senator Patrick Leahy, please.
Joe, thank you. Knowing of the 3 you speak of in our activities at St. Michael's High School, no longer there, one of the reasons because the 3 of us were there, I can almost think what the dear nuns would have said. Joe was the person who once in a meeting here in Vermont, when I was introduced as the only Democrat elected in Vermont's 200-year history, it was Joe's voice we heard in the back room says, "Hey, up, I'm not going to make that mistake again." But Kevin and John, I enjoyed that, and I know Kevin said that he can't wait to do it again. I heard Tony mutter, "Yeah," when they joined the Alabama State Police. Joe, you said to thank all the companies that paid for the people to be here. I want you to know that the company I work for has a very large deficit, so Marcel and I paid our own way. And Joe was right when he said, in speaking of Catholic education, I mean, there's going to be a lot of inside Catholic jokes here tonight, and I apologize to the rest of you, but we don't get a chance to shine often in the state of Vermont. The term Yankee came here, but talked about Tony as a young Catholic learning 2 things, the rhythm system and bingo. Tony, with 10 kids, I hope you did a hell of a lot better at bingo than you. I have, in a sense of bipartisanship, though, I've been asked to read a letter from Bob Dole, the Republican leader of the Senate. And it's a true letter. He says, "Dear Tony, my thoughts are with you as your many friends and admirers gather to honor you as the Multiple Sclerosis Society Man of the Year. They could not have selected a better person. As you know, Tony, I've long been envious of your position as president of Seaview. At least you got to be president of something." You've had many remarkable accomplishments in your life, Tony, and there's still time for many more. This really is a letter from Bob Dole. It says, Strom Thurmond says, if you wait another 10 years or so, you may be old enough for the United States Senate. And with Pat Leahy and I as your co-chairs, you couldn't lose. Elizabeth joins with me in sending our very best. I called Bob Dole this afternoon because I told him I was going to read the letter, and he said yes. And when Tony gets here, Strom Thurmond will be his father figure. I mention that because so many people tonight said to Marcel and me when we came in here, or said especially to Marcel, said, your uncle looks so young. And how young he does look. And I hope you notice this, because as I look at the schedule going on here, this evening is going to go on so long, most of us will have aged considerably by the time we get out of this room, but Tony will look the same as he always did. In fact, I was asked at a press conference today, shortly after I saw the schedule for this evening's list of speakers, I was asked at a press conference what I was planning to do from now until Election Day. I said, hell, I'll still be at the Sheraton at Tony's roast. But I think back to so many years ago, over 30 years ago now, 32 years ago, when I married Marcel. And you have to understand these French-Canadian families. I mean, Marcel's mother and father, both born in Canada, came here and on their wedding day still spoke French, and so I had to learn French to be able to speak with them. So I had to learn both French and English. Then I met Tony, and I had to learn a third language because he didn't speak either French or English. In fact, Tony, I'd be hitchhiking home from St. Michael's. Tony used to pick me up hitchhiking. He told me, young man, you work hard at school and all that, and I'll give you a job in the insurance agency someday. And I must say, his fellow Republicans never forgave him for not giving me that job, and I went on and got one of my own. But in fact, I thought by this time I'd be working for him, not roasting him. But Tony, I got to tell you, my mother, who's a sweet first-generation Italian-American, said to me, I told her I was marrying the niece of a prominent ethnic Republican. She said she didn't know the Pizzigallis had any nieces, but when I told my mom, she said, what's this Republican's name? I said, Antonio Pomerleau. She said, well, thank God, at least he's Italian. But you know, it's an interesting thing, Tony, to be serious for a moment. You have always, and what I've loved so much about you from the time I first knew you, that you have always put your family and your city and your state first. And I think of the times that we've had together. We've had joys and we've had sorrows together in our family. We've had sorrows in losing a loving daughter and goddaughter and losing a brother and father-in-law. But we've had joys, so many joys. And the real joys in the Pomerleau family, I have found, have not been the joys of success in business or anything of that. That's been secondary. The joys have all been family joys. Because Tony and Rita, you've always understood that family successes are the only real successes that count in life. And so Rita and your daughters and your sons and your daughters-in-laws and sons-in-laws and 13 grandchildren, I'm jealous on that part, your nieces and nephews and their spouses, I want to congratulate all of you. And Marcel got off work about 3 o'clock this morning and came up here to join with us because we know that family times are the best times and the happiest times we've had when we've been all together of us, all of us as a family with this Irish Italian you've allowed into your family at camps and your house and your boat and so forth. So Tony, Marcel et moi, nous vous souhaitons une longue vie, beaucoup de succès et une famille pleine d'amour. Mon oncle, à votre santé.
Wasn't that wonderful? Thank you, Senator. That was great. My father told me years ago, he said, be kind to lawyers. He said, they may not be able to help you very much, but they sure as hell can hurt you. And if you think that I'm going to tell you a whole pile of lawyer jokes, you're mistaken. But there's something that someone said, and I don't know if it's true, but attorneys are the only group of people in this nation that can take a solution and turn it into a problem. I will tell you one story, because this is my absolute all-time favorite lawyer story, and it only happened in the Gulf War, which most of you remember. It was in all the papers, and it was on TV. If you will remember, 500 of America's top attorneys were kidnapped by the terrorists, and they said if we didn't meet their demands, that they'd release one every hour. Charlie Shea is the only roaster that Tony asked me to ask him to limit his time. And I says, what for? Charlie's a good friend of mine, a good friend of yours. He says, Joe, at 2.5 an hour, how much can I afford to give him? I said, Tony, if he talks 10 minutes, so it's half 100. Don't worry about it. He says, Joe, you got a lot to learn. He always, when he bills me, has research. So I asked Charlie, I says, look, let's be upfront with it. What do you want? He says, look, my firm dropped 1,000 and I'd like 500 towards Pat's dress. He says, 1,500 is okay. Charlie, I don't know what this means, but Charlie is really Tony's mouthpiece. John, can you wave that? I think so. He's represented Tony for a number of years, and they also have a close personal relationship. My relationship with Charlie Shea goes back to Montpelier because he's someone I've known since for, umpteen years, and together in 1948, in September at Fenway Park, we saw Joe DiMaggio hit a home run with the bases loaded. That's true. Charlie came to Burlington as a young man, established Gravel and Shea in 1967, and has seen that firm grow to one of the most prestigious law firms, perhaps in northern New England, and on the side, raised 8 gorgeous children. And I am so proud to present now, and I hope you'll give him a warm welcome, Attorney Charles Shea.
Thank you, Joe. I did meet Joe in the kindergarten, and Joe was one of those that was in the front row, always raising his hand whenever they asked the question. And he, as a result, was able to skip a couple of grades, and he managed to get way ahead of me, lead me around, and is always a moderator. But one of the things that I didn't tell you about tonight, Joe, is that I do have a table full of lawyers over here, and I've asked them to run the meter as well during this event. You'll appreciate that, Tony. Well, Honorable Antonio Benjamin Pomerleau and friends of multiple sclerosis. One of the things that I just did want to mention is that I had a sister, Marilyn, who had multiple sclerosis, and she died 15 years ago after having had the disease for 25 years. And she was the mother of 4 delightful children. They're grown now with children of their own. Very close to me, and it was a tragic loss. And I sure hope that funds from this dinner this evening will help find a cure for that very difficult disease, and it takes tragic life. With respect to Joe, you probably have gathered Joe doesn't like to spend money very much, and he finally, when he was in Burlington, had a legal problem. He came over to my office, and he came in and he asked me if what my least expensive fee was, and I said $200 for 3 questions, Joe. He said, gee, Joe, that's pretty expensive, isn't it? I said, yes. And what's your third question, Joe? And Joe says that I'm the mouthpiece for Tony Pomerleau, that modest, humble individual. John showed you that photo on the Free Press on Sunday where he was imitating God creating the universe. Well, it's impossible to be the mouthpiece for Tony Pomerleau. But let me just give you an example of a legal consultation with Tony that happens on a regular basis. Tony will call, say, I've got to see you right away. I said, fine, come on over. He'll come breezing in the office, wave to the secretary, the receptionist, go in, get his coffee or Coke, which he contends he's paid for and thinks he paid the rent anyway in the building, and usher himself into my office, sit down, and start telling me his legal problem. Before you know it, he's telling me how he used to fit shoes at Endicott Johnson and sold groceries and distributed beer and wine and built shopping centers, and how he has told Bob Dole how to run the Senate, Tip O'Neill how to run the House of Representatives, Howard Baker how to run the White House, David Brinkley how to run his TV show. And with you, Pat, he says that you're just like Ernie. You're part of the family, and you don't do anything he tells you to do. But with you, Bernie, he's been bragging about how after many, many years of discussing the issues of taxation, he finally was able to convince you to raise rates on the rich in Washington. And the governor told me just a little while ago about an occasion where a member of a state board died, and the next morning Tony called up and said, can I take the decedent's place? And the governor said, gee, that's okay with me, Tony, but you better check with the undertaker. Now, as we go through this, I'll then say to Tony, we're still in this meeting, and he's gone through all these matters which he has resolved, and I'll say, let me start answering questions. He says, hold on, wait till I finish my question, Charlie. I haven't finished my question. He will then answer his own question and say to me, Charlie, you know that some people are born lucky and some people are born with brains. And I, Pomerleau, are born lucky. Well, believe me, he I think, was lucky in one part of his life when he was entrapped Rita Murphy to come down from Canada and marry him. She was a nurse, and she brought with her an Irish heritage, and of course Tony has always wanted to have some Irish blood in his veins, which he has for many, many years discussed, and he was very fortunate in that to have this Irish lass arrive. And the only thing I can say, Rita, is that you sure are going straight on to heaven, because you've had your purgatory here on earth with Tony. Finally, Tony is, he's wonderful on numbers. As you probably know, he can tell you the rent that a tenant paid back 13, 15 years ago. And he can tell you the bottom line without looking at a paper for every single one of his rentals all over the state. No problem. As a matter of fact, he's so good, although he's not good on names. So if you meet him, you could give him your Social Security number, say like 08240806. The next time he met you, he would give you your Social Security number back. He always remembers numbers. Now, I wanted to read a serious note for you, Tony. And this is my view of Tony and what he's attained. And it's really the lyrics from a song which Frank Sinatra made quite famous. I've changed the words a little bit to properly reflect it. And some of you may remember it or may know it by the name of My Way. Anyway, my friend, I state your case of which I am certain. You lived a life that is full. You traveled each and every highway, and more, much more than that, you did it your way. Regrets you've had a few, but then again too few to mention. You did what you had to do and saw it through without exemption. You planned each charted course, each careful step on the byway. More, much more than this, you did it your way. Yes, there were times when you bit off more than you can chew. But through it all, when there was doubt, you ate it up and spit it out. You faced it all and you stood tall, and you did it your way. You loved, you laughed and cried. You had your share of losing. To think you did all that and not in a shy way, you did it your way. For what is a man? What has he got, if not himself? To say the things he truly feels, and not the words of one who is not sincere. The record shows you took the blows and you did it your way. It's been a pleasure to know you, friend.
Get better and better. Believe me, I've been racking my brains how to introduce the next roaster. He happens to be Ernie Pomerleau. And I said, because there was a phrase years ago we used to use, there's a phrase like, he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. But gosh, that would be the understatement of the year. So I said, a gold spoon? Service for 12 with all the extras? Born with 2 shopping centers? You know, I mean, how do you say it? And I still don't know exactly. And so I talked with Ernie last week, and he is really a marvelous man. But years ago, I think it was a little bit different. And I share a story with you that he shared with me only a few days ago to prove that difference. When Ernie got out of college, which was about 25 years ago, I believe this year, Ernie, Tony was very successful at that time. He said, Dad gave me $100,000 and said, Ernie, this is yours. You can invest it, you can spend it, you can do whatever you want, but I want to see what you do with this. How did you do, Ernie? He said, Joe, it was gone in 5 years. I said, gone in 5 years, $100,000, and that was 25 years ago. What'd you spend it on? Well, he said, quite a bit of it went on fast cars and women and booze, and the rest I wasted. Tony has the awesome responsibility of being president of Pomerleau Real Estate, and I say that not facetiously, but you realize how much rent he's got to count each week? He's the guy to add up all those numbers. And he's also chairman of the Vermont Federal Bank, and he has a long list of community involvement. Yes, not only has he followed his dad in his footsteps and made perhaps many improvements, but he also spends a lot of time in improving the quality of life. And Tony, you should be proud of all your family, all your accomplishments, and I want to tell you something, I know how proud you are of Ernie. Would you give Ernie Pomerleau a very warm welcome?
Joe, I was just thinking when you said instead of a silver spoon, I got a tea set. Anybody that knows my father knows that it would have been stainless. This is a real treat. Do you know how many times I've had an opportunity to roast my father? None. And trust me, even though I'm kind of one of the mop-up batters here, there's no lack of material. So even though a lot of my lines have been used, I can easily improvise. I'll do a little roasting, and what I looked at when I initially was trying to walk through some material, I realized that our contract with you, Dad, comes up at the end of December. And for the sake of my associates and their families, I will try to soften some of it, but not all. And you can take that for what it's worth. Joe's thought I could get immunity, but Charlie couldn't get the papers put together, and Dad wouldn't sign them. So here goes anyway. What I'd like to do is paint a couple of little vignettes for you to kind of pick up the program. And in conjunction with my sisters, hopefully develop a little mosaic that you'll understand the other side of this gentleman. The article that's been mentioned several times, the one we now know very well, illustrates a couple of things which I'll get into, but one piece that I think for those of you that read it, I'm sure most of you have, it talks about that most of his children were okay. I want you to know that I'm the minority. It is not uncommon for him to introduce me as the first experiment that failed. I want you to know, Dad, that there's really no lasting permanent scars from this constant harassment that I can't survive. Many of you probably would like to know what it's like to work for your father, those that you don't, but more importantly, what it's like to work for Tony Pomerleau. The word easy does not play into the terms that I would use. There are a lot of words, but Joe told me I only had 5 minutes. So I will go on. But it's important to understand how I became indoctrinated into this business. When the first son of a family is born, it's tradition the father goes out and buys basketballs and footballs and all those kind of things, charging. I got an attaché case.
You have to hold the second.
It was a cute attaché case, and I appreciated it. It also set the stage, and I knew I would be in the family business. And as I developed each year, always getting, as Dad would say, to develop my constitution, the jobs that nobody else wanted. And that continued. When I finally went to work for Pay, he had a pay for what you're worth program. Yeah. I'm still working on it. Every year I'd go back and say, geez, Dad, I'd really like a raise. It's about time. And he'd continually provide me with promises of the future and new titles. It got to the point that after a number of years, our accountant said I could use the titles and the promises as an asset on my financial statement. Attitude. It's hard to imagine, but words like unassuming, shy, and reserved do not apply to this man. As a matter of fact, after that article that we talked about, I dropped by the house on Sunday, and he had called Jim Carrey of the Free Press, and he was questioning why Aristide of Haiti had gotten so much front coverage. And it was only that big to begin with. I thought it wasn't bad. Estate planning. This is always something that sons get quite involved with. I've worked diligently with Charlie Shea and Dennis Voigt, and we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to resolve this. And to give you an idea of how we start off the meetings, my father has a mantra that he repeats continuously and opens up the meetings. He said, if I can't take it with me, I'm not going. And you know what? I think it's true. Mentor. Dad's been my mentor since I was a child, but particularly, you all need a mentor in various elements of your life. And in my business world, one of the key pieces that I remember is when I was brand new and looking for direction, we we were looking over our portfolio of all of our properties. And I remember at a very tender moment, he turned to me and he said, you know, he said, Ernie, someday this will all be yours. And then he paused and looked at me and said, of course, until I come up with a better solution. Keeping with this endearing trait that we've developed between us, shortly thereafter, I remember we were out on a job site. And he said, you know, Ernie, you're still new at this job. And he said, I really want to not inhibit you in any way. And he said, this is a real important lesson. He said, I want you to feel free to dream the impossible dreams. And he thought about that for a while. And he said, but remember, I am the unbeatable foe. Rules. My father follows a lot of rules. They're all his rules, but he does follow them. And if you ask his tennis buddies, he gives new meaning to home court advantage. Dad is a very unique individual. They broke the mold when they designed him. God did not want two of these people. I promised to do this for only 5 minutes. I could go on, but I'll allow the flip side of the family, which we have lots of good stories, which you'll hear a few. And I have to be careful because since Dad will be the ultimate mop-up batter, as Charlie had mentioned, Dad remembers a number of things. He doesn't remember names, but he remembers numbers, and he remembers insults. And he always gets even. It's hard to do one-upmanship on him. Anyway, on a serious note, I just wanted to say that we love you, and we're very appreciative of all your efforts, both for the family and the community, and thank you.
See you in the morning.
Grace and Anne Marie, are you about set?
We are.
Can I make just one comment first? In the number of years that I've known the Pomerleaus, and 3 roasters at least this evening have alluded to this, there's something that is not absent in their family. And I'm not sure exactly all the reasons, maybe because everything hasn't always worked well, and maybe because so many things have. But there's no absence of love. There's so much love in that family for one another. And I think that's the greatest asset, Tony, that your family has. And I'm proud to present Grace and Anne Marie. Give them a big hand, please.
Okay, it's on. Okay. Let's see if it can be heard. We're Pomerleaus. We will figure out how to use a microphone in just a second. Didn't we have rattles that look just like this? Okay.
Yes. Can you hear me, Helmut? Not sure if I'm close enough. Before Grace and I begin, I did want to make a little comment to something that Mr. Handy Roaster over there made about Mom. And in great defense of Mom, when it comes to the charge cards, Mom is a big shopper. But it's for her 10 children, her 13 grandchildren, and Mr. Roasty over there wouldn't look as good as he does if it wasn't for Mom. And also, when it comes to numbers, one thing you have to know in our house, there is no numbers used above 29. Birthdays, anniversaries, you name it. So, Mr. Handy, we love you to death, but I don't think you're going to be playing tennis at our house anymore. We are just delighted to be here tonight. We're awfully proud to be here, as Dad is honored, and we're awfully proud that it's for the Multiple Sclerosis Society. When we received the invitation, we saw that there was a very distinguished list of gentlemen that would be roasting Dad. And I turned to Mr. Father of 8 women and said, Dad, there's no women on this list. He said, well, I didn't know any. So that's why Grace and I are here.
Okay, now let me tell you a little something about our father. The man is a wonderful businessman, and he is an excellent father, but a farmer he is not. Now, Dad has told us for years how he grew up in Newport and grew his own vegetables in the soil and weeding and, you know, all this stuff. But you know what? We've seen your garden, Dad. And I just want my brothers and sisters, who thinks Dad is lying about ever being on a farm? Okay? How about ever visiting a farm? Yes, Dad's idea of growing vegetables has nothing to do with quality or quantity. It's size. I mean, he's got to go to Ben Trottier's house with a tomato, let me tell you. So Dad feels that, you know, if Miracle Grow can work that well diluted, imagine what it's like right on the soil. I mean, granted, that summer it looked a little bit like Hiroshima, but you should have seen the tomato that came out of that garden, let me tell you. Actually, in the paper on Sunday, the picture of Dad, that's what he was talking about, really, was the tomato. It was this big. Oh, and speaking of Dad in Newport, Dad told us all sorts of stories about Newport. I mean, all sorts of stories about Newport. One of my favorites is the trip to school. Trip to school. Whoa, when I was a kid, I went 5 miles of snow. No, 6 miles in the snow. No, every year the road gets longer and the snow gets deeper and the wind gets stronger. Last I heard, he was pulling 2 orphans on a sled. You know, and it's, Dad, what a wonderful guy. But even as a child, during the Depression, helping out his parents for a little extra money, but by selling canaries, Dad? Canaries? Bet you St. Francis Assisi was working overtime that year.
When it comes to self-confidence, Dad exudes self-confidence. Dad not only thinks he knows everything, he knows everything.
Well, I do.
What is she saying?
Well, I do. As a matter of fact, I never wanted to be anybody else but Tony Pomerleau. And as a matter of fact, I always hear my tennis cronies saying those same words.
I'm sorry.
I bet you didn't know that Jesus was Latin for Tony.
When it comes to business information, Dad is impeccable. He remembers everything. When it comes to family matters, he's not always quite so good. Dad, tell us about the first person you ever sold a pair of shoes to.
Why, that was Mary Ann LaFlamme, cute little girl. Father lived down the street, had a little convenience store. Mother kind of lived above it.
Right. Now, Daddy, tell me what's Alice's middle name.
Alice.
Alice. You know,
Alice.
Your 7th daughter?
Yep. 7th?
8th daughter. 7th, yeah.
Okay. Let me...
Sit down.
Alice's middle name, Dad, what is it?
Alice's middle name. Well,
Alice.
let me tell you, I helped your mother name each and every one of you kids.
Well, what is it?
What is it? It's Mary.
No, Dad.
No, it's your mother's maiden name, Murphy.
No, it isn't, Dad. It is M as in Margaret.
M as in Margaret. Well, it's not Margaret.
It is, Dad.
What the hell do we name her Margaret for? We don't know anybody named Margaret. Rita, what do we name her Margaret for?
Now, as Mr. Shea mentioned, Dad is incredible with phone numbers. He comes up with anything. So, Dad, tell us what's the number of Aubuchon Hardware in Boston.
Oh, 617-435-4567.
And, Dad, what's the number of the Grand Union in Paterson, New Jersey?
643-5525. You want to know who's the
No,
manager?
Dad. No, I don't want to know that. Dad.
I know it's Social Security.
When's Grace's birthday?
Grace's?
Grace's.
Baby of the family. The little girl, last one. Remember, like it was yesterday.
Daddy, that part's right, but when's her birthday?
Her birthday?
When she was born?
Grace's?
That's it.
I know this one. You know why I know this one?
Why do you know, Dad?
I'll tell you. I just bought the shopping center up in St. Albans there. But the ground was still frozen, so we couldn't put in the main septic line, so it was March.
That's right, Dad. Well, getting back to phones and phone numbers, Alexander Graham Bell was put on this earth to invent phones for Tony Pomerleau. He can't wait to pick one up, and he can't wait to hang up on you.
Hey, Anna Maria, this is Daddy Boy.
Hi, Daddy.
Guess where I am?
I have no idea.
35,000 feet above your head right now.
What? Where are you, Dad?
Where am I? I'm on an airplane. Yep, that's it. That's what I'm doing. Okay, girl. Okay, girl.
Dad recently put a cellular phone into my van for safety reasons. I always know when Dad has borrowed my van, because when I get my cellular one phone bill, there's about 37 extra calls on it. Okay, you gotta switch to this now. Dad has been absolutely a terrific dad, but sometimes he misses out on the fine details of life. On our very first trip as a whole family, Mom and Dad really braved the odds, put us in 2 different cars, truck-loaded us up to Expo 67, and we'd make this great escape, get over to Expo. Well, Dad had to go back and get Alice, who we left back at the hotel. One of our other big ventures was this, many of you have heard about our Winnebago trip. That 8 of us, yes. Dad took 8 of us, and Mom really loved this trip, took all of us up to Canada. Well, we'd all be sleeping, and it would be about 5:30 in the morning. All of a sudden, the Winnebago would start moving, and there was old Tony up front in his nightgown and his robe driving us away. But all of a sudden, he'd turn a corner and would have forgotten to lock the refrigerator, and a Harrington ham fell out on Dennis. Our other family trips, we would go down to Florida every year. And, Grace, you want to come in? We'd go down to Florida every year. And Dad would right away take us down to the pool. And then we'd all be down in the pool, and we'd all be having a grand time down there with Dad splashing around. And then Mom would have to end up taking care of our sunburns all night after that. Now, Dad is in the epitome of the business worker, loyal and honest. So I thought, well, Dad and I had a little bet going this week, and I'm here to tell you, he cheats. I'm not going to go into detail. I'm not going to put out the family laundry right now, but any one of you, I want you to go up and ask Dad why he owes me $1,300. And you'll get his story. You'll get his story, and then come get the real story. Anyway, don't we see into that? Daddy, we love you very much. And I just want to say, Daddy, the one thing Dad has told all of us is behind each other's back, he'd come up and he goes, you know, honey, you're my favorite. Well, Daddy, I'm here to say I know I'm your favorite.
Nuh-uh. Nuh-uh.
Hey, what direction? Okay, Grace.
Thanks again, girls. That was terrific. I had the privilege of talking to David Brinkley on the telephone tonight at 5:30. And it was a thrill for me to do it. And he said, Joe, this is David Brinkley. I said, Mr. Brinkley. And I'm really not a bashful person, but I was just flattered to know that this man that I watched on TV many, many years ago with Chet Honey, said, good night, Chet, good night, David. And and that he was speaking to me. And I said, I wish that you could tell me something so that when I introduce you, I could do it in a credible manner. He says, hey, I don't want anything. He says, all you people know me. He said, I want you to say 3 things. He said, I want you to say that I like Tony Pomerleau, that I like Vermont, and that I have someone very close to me that has MS. And for those 3 reasons, I'm here. And so would you give our distinguished guest a very warm welcome, David Brinkley.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. That even has the unusual, almost unique quality of being true. If I had known I had to get up here after John Sonic, I'd have stayed in Washington. Then he's followed by the Pomerleaus. It's a whole damn family of comedians. Who can compete with that? I cannot. I talk about things like the gross national product. Ben and Jerry, Rita, Tony, all your children, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You never did learn the rhythm system, did you? You never did. Fun. No, I guess not. In those early years of your marriage, Tony, how did you find time to build an insurance and real estate business? There are a great many Pomerleaus here, and I don't know all of them, but I love those I do know. And I know the town and the state are lucky to have them. I would like to take them all home with me to Washington when I go home tomorrow morning, because I figure we need them a hell of a lot more than you do. The speech I wrote, I called Tony the other day and said, I've never been to a roast, which happened to be the truth. I haven't. And I didn't quite know what to do. I said, what do you do at a roast? He said, I don't want you to do anything at the roast. Let the others do the roasting. Mainly because I don't even know their names. So I don't know their failures to make fun of. And he said, you just make a speech. Well, having sat here for a while now, I know that's entirely bad advice, worse than the usual advice you give. If anybody here wants to hear a speech about the gross national product tonight, 10:15, you've been here all night full of chocolate cake, bad wine. I would like to thank those who worked so hard to make this dinner a success, particularly the waiters. They were Michael Dukakis, Gary Hart, Senator Bob Packwood. Wait a minute, I'm not through yet. Senator Packwood, Senator Jesse Helms, Congressman Dan Rostenkowski, and Spiro Agnew. And a new waitress just hired today, Jennifer Flowers. Now, Tony, not long ago they were electing a new governor in Texas. And I went down there to watch. I like politics. And one of the candidates was named Clayton Williams, an oil zillionaire, famous for having much money and no brains. And he very quickly proved it. He made one pretty good speech, I thought. He said, to be a politician, you have to be a salesman. You have to be able to persuade people to vote for you and to believe what you say. And I used to be a salesman. I sold life insurance. Life insurance. He said, if you can persuade a Texan to give up his beer money to buy a life insurance, so when he dies, his wife can live happily ever after with another man, you're a salesman. I had a very long, very boring speech here, which I have cut to ribbons. And I keep losing my place because whatever I plan to say, I've already cut it out. It's 10:30. It's about time to be clearing out the parking lot, so I'll make this short. See, I already said that. I do want to bring you up to date on the news from Washington, where I live. Our mayor, the mayor of our city, named Marion Barry, was busted in a hotel room, and the police took pictures of him using cocaine, crack cocaine. He was arrested, convicted, and he spent time in prison, and they gave him a job in the prison shop. Now he is out, He's running for mayor again. He almost certainly will be elected. If so, he will be the only official to arrive on Inauguration Day in a chauffeured limousine bearing license plates that he made. Now, Tony, you probably should have told me a little more about what a roast is supposed to be. I really didn't know what to do with it. I do notice, oddly enough, that nobody's used the familiar, stock, standard, ancient 19th century Vermont joke about Calvin Coolidge, a son of Vermont. He was famous primarily for being taciturn, for almost never saying anything. One night at dinner, a woman was seated beside him, and she said, "Mr. President, my friends have bet me that I can get you to say 3 words." Coolidge said, "You lose." This is serious. It's about the only thing I have left here that's serious. I was doing a little research. This is one I know you have not heard. A diplomat from Scandinavia was visiting Coolidge in his office at a time when he had announced he would not run for another term. And he used his typical stilted language and said, "I do not choose to run." He was asked why. Again, this is not funny. Don't expect any laughs. I don't want to disappoint you. Coolidge said, because in the next presidential term, this is his language, in the next presidential term, there's going to be the goddamnedest depression in the history of this country. And now we know he was right. He withdrew, let Herbert Hoover take the fall for the depression, which the Democrats named for him. Now, let's see. Now, it is difficult and strange for those of us who work in television to deal with the following problem. The American people cannot stand the sight of hungry babies. That is why we went into Somalia. That's why we have gone into Haiti. That's why we have gone into other places. It is strange that we now have the responsibility to decide which hungry babies will be seen and who will hear their cries, and which president will be forced by public opinion to send our military into another grubby, unclean country carrying clean water and truckloads of spam. We do not teach this in journalism school, and none of us really knows what to do about it. I can explain one factor in it, and it's this. The country called Sudan, which is due south of Egypt, has more hungry babies than anybody, but no one knows it because the dictators who run the country will not allow a television camera to come into the place. So the babies there starve in private. That's where it stands at the moment. If it changes, I haven't seen any evidence of it. So that's what we do the deciding, unwillingly. We are unprepared for it. We don't know anything about it, but we have to do it anyway. And at one of those terrible Washington dinners with bad food, chicken and peas, Vice President Al Gore got up and said, "People ask me how it feels to be number 2. He said, "She seems to be enjoying it." Well, things change. We thought for a time that Hillary was president until she made some money in cattle futures, and then she was tainted by the streak of Puritanism that still exists in this country. I have looked it up because I never really knew. The Puritans were English Protestants who came to this country in the 17th century. To this day, their descendants who are still here still think it is sinful to have more money than they think you should have. Their thinking is carried on by the House Ways and Means Committee. Then we had Al Gore come in to reinvent government, or to reinvent glass ashtrays. He set up a task force and they created 300 pounds of paper on the subject of glass ashtrays. This is the truth. I'm not making this up. The kind you buy in dime stores for about 39 cents. Gore found there was a government regulation saying that if he or the government bought this ashtray, it had to pass a crash test. If dropped on a concrete floor, it could not shatter into more than 35 pieces. I am not making this up. I find it to be a quite engaging picture. A government bureaucrat thin hair, rimless glasses, a Robert Hall blue suit, silk socks, and unshined shoes, down on the floor counting the fragments of a broken ashtray to see if he is in keeping with the regulations. He found that the only way to tell if an ashtray was suitable for the government was to destroy it. Something new in American life. Before you buy anything, destroy it to see if it's any good. The logic escapes me. Furthermore, there was all this fuss about ashtrays at a time when a great many people have quit smoking, and at a time when the government buildings are, in all government buildings, smoking is forbidden. There are some great minds at work here. Now, to get back to my reason for being here, having skipped 5 or 6 pages, we are here, of course, to honor Tony Pomerleau. And it is a pleasure for me to have a small part in this, Tony, because you and I are good friends and have been for a few years. I will not list all of his good works in this city and in this state, but if every town, every state had a Tony Pomerleau and his wonderful family along with him, this country would be a better country. I have seen him in action when as a sort of sideline, he took over control of the Seaview Hotel in Bal Harbor, Florida, where my wife and I have had an apartment. Susan, right here. Susan. We've had an apartment for a long time. And we noticed when Tony arrived, there were great changes for the better. First, thanks to Tony, the stealing has stopped. Prior to his arrival, the hotel made a lot of money but never saw any of it, because the management in place at that time stole it all out the back door. Believe it or not, they even stole a grand piano. Now, it was one of the wonders of the age. We all know about stealing hotel towels, but how on earth can you get a grand hotel out of a hotel, a grand piano out of a hotel, without having it noticed? I don't know. But Tony came along, everything has changed, it's all better, the place is making money and the hotel is getting the money. We have the piano back. And Tony, for all of us, we thank you. Now, as I was leaving our studios Sunday, they handed me our latest poll figures on the upcoming election. And they show that all of Vermont's governor and Congress members are all will be safely reelected. So good news for several reasons. One is that none of them will have to use Lyndon Johnson's old stunt. When he ran for the Senate in Texas for the first time, he stole the election. He told me that himself. With great pride, he told me that. He did it by rounding up his friends at night, taking them into a graveyard to take names off of tombstones and to enter them on the voting rolls and show them as having voted for him. As they worked their way down the rows of tombstones, they came to one that was old and had moss grown over it and was hard to read. And one of the guys shouted to Johnson, "Lyndon, this is too hard to read. I'm going to skip this." Johnson said, "You will not skip it. He's got as much right to vote as anybody in the cemetery." Susan and I will go back to Washington tomorrow morning. I can't find any way to escape it. And we will find that Bill Clinton still thinks he's having a hard time. And he is. He might remember, however, that George Bush in his first year or two in office also had a hard time. Bush's first appointee to the Supreme Court was Robert Bork. The Senate turned him down because they thought he was too intelligent. His second appointee was John Tower of Texas, appointed to be Secretary of Defense. They turned him down because they thought he drank too much. I checked and found that those voting against him included the heaviest drinkers in the Senate. Through it all, Tower said he hardly ever touched a drop, maybe a little eggnog on Christmas Eve. That's what he said. Which reminded me, people always say this when they're standing up talking. It didn't remind me of it. I thought about it 2 or 3 days ago. A man called his wife, said, "Honey, I have to work late in the office. I won't be home for dinner." He showed up the next morning at 7 a.m. and found her in the kitchen making coffee. She asked the inevitable question, "Where the hell have you been?" He said, "Well, I got home late. I didn't have my key. I didn't want to wake you up, so I slept on that old couch out in the garage." She said, the couch in the garage. I gave that to the Salvation Army 3 years ago. He said, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I think it's time to clear out the parking lot. I have very much enjoyed visiting in your beautiful state, in this lovely city, which I've never seen before, having a chance to meet some of you. I do wish we had more time. In the meantime, however, Rita, Rosemary, Anne Marie, and everyone, thank you, and good night.
On behalf of the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, we would like to present Tony Pomerleau with the Hope Award, the highest award that the Society has to offer. Tony?
Don't you guys leave, the show's just starting.
We were, despite the late start of supper, we were making some good time. And I think they serve coffee later if you want. I didn't have to think long about this as how I would present our guest of honor tonight, because it was a story I've used at another roast for him when he was leaving the police department after 17 years. And I think it says it all. In a Protestant church, there was a drive to raise money. And when the drive had concluded, the minister was there with his church workers, and they were adding up the proceeds and reporting who gave what. And an unusually large donation was recorded by someone who always gave a large donation. And one of the workers said, "No wonder he gives so much. He's got it." And the minister commented, "I wonder if he gives because he's got it, or if he's got it because he gives." I'd like to present to you now a man that I think really gives. Please welcome our guest.
Question and answers of the roasters here. I'd like to take just a few minutes to recognize some people that came from a long ways out of town. And I'll start with Grand Union. Grand Union, I think our first deal with them was in 1951. Of course, everybody has died or gone since then, and I'm still there. I've buried like 5 presidents and 4 or 5 chairmen, and I always told the young fellas coming in, I'd say, be nice to me, because chances are I'll still be here when you're gone. So Ray Ayers, where are you? Be nice to me, because I'll be there when you're gone. The second company that I've been doing business for a long, long time, back in the 50s, and I sure not burying those people, is the Aubuchon Hardware Company. They keep on coming and coming and coming. And one of my dear old friend that I've been wheeling and dealing with, which has been a pleasure, is here tonight celebrating his 80th birthday. Mr. Moran, please stand up. Mark, I must have been real easy to deal with because you look pretty good. Now the Grand Union crowd's made it. Next is the Price Chopper, which Grand Union, incidentally, Ray and his cohorts are from New Jersey. Second is the Price Chopper out of Albany. I call Ray Schleich, and I said, Ray, we have, Ron, I said, I'm saying Ray because I'm so used to saying Ray Ayers instead of Grand Union Price Chopper. He reminded me of that, so that's why I'm saying it. So I said, Ron, we haven't heard from you. So he said, what do you mean? I said, well, we invited you to the MS here, and I says, we haven't heard from you. I said, you're going to let Grand Union put you to shame? So he says, not by damn sight. So he says, I'll be up with another guy around. I said, nothing doing, nothing less than a table. So they bought a table and they're here tonight. I appreciate it. Then I found out the Hannaford brothers weren't here, which is Martin grocery store. So I called them up. I said, you want to, like Grand Union and Price Chopper, put you guys to shame? So Doug Boyce, I don't know if you're here, but anyway, he says, well, I might be up. And I said, what the hell are you talking about? 1 or 2. Nothing less than a table. So they're here from Portland, Maine. I appreciate that, too. Now the man came from Maine. Rod Gant is visiting us, so he's here tonight. So Rod, thanks for coming. We have quite a few people that's out of town. Ross Singh, he's the general manager of the Seaview Hotel, came all the way from Belle Harbor. He's the one that helped me to turn the hotel around, and anything goes wrong, I blame him. Anything goes well, I take the credit. So Raj, thanks for coming. You know about that, don't you, Ernie? A couple dear friend of ours that we've known since back in the early 50s, and they're out here out of Brooklyn, New York, Dr. and Mrs. Mastorocco. One guy that I was amazed and surprised, pleasantly surprised, and I shouldn't have been, because everywhere we go to, in Rome and Greece and England and France, we always run into Father Robinson. And he's getting sort of classy. He's matched my hair. So where are you, Father Robinson? He's from Detroit. There he is. He came all the way from Detroit. Anyway, another guy came far, far away. You people probably never heard Arlen Pond. You really can't get there from here. Dr. Riggy, a close friend of mine for many, many, many years, and we've been tennis partners and golfers and poker players, and he doesn't win very often on my tennis court, on my boat, and neither does Dr. Lavoie or Dr. Trottier. And so we get along fine, and I made a... I remember Joe Handy last week says, who's serving? I said, I am. He said, why? I said, what the hell? I own the court and these are my balls. So he thought that was a good reason. Another guy I guess I should really bring up his name because, poor Rita's put up with me for 48 years. The other person has put up with me for 37 years. And he always claims he's underpaid, and I always claim he's overpaid. This is Charlie Lloyd. He's been with me for 37 years. So now perhaps I'll try to answer what all of these professional politicians and lawyers and everything else. Half of it, the good part, was true. The rest of it, these politicians, in particular lawyers, that they kind of twist the truth a little bit. So perhaps I should start with my dear friend, David Brinkley. We go on a boat quite often, and David and I were in back of the boat as we spent a few days on a boat, and I was telling David, I said, when I first came to work, after I got out of school and I started work, I said, if anybody would have given me the, listen to this, Congressman. If anybody gave me the amount of money that I paid 1 year's taxes, I'd have taken for the rest of my life. So David says, well, he says, when I went to work as a young advertiser, and news, I'm sorry. You're still in news, aren't you? He said, I was getting $25 a week. And he said, if somebody offered me a contract for $50 a week, he said, I'd have probably taken it for life too. And he said, but I have to tell a little story to that. He said, I was making $25 a week. And I was in the news department, and he says, I fell madly in love with a young secretary. And he says, she wanted to get married. And I said, I really, really can't get married on $25 a week. He said, the minute I make $50 a week, we'll get married. So I asked her, in fact, Rita asked him, she said, what happened to young secretary? She said, she found a man with $50 a week. So we asked different things as we're young, different things we did and everything. So I says, David, I'll ask you a personal thing. I said, do you remember the first time you had sex? He says, hell, I can't remember the last time. Of course, I'm a lot younger than he is. So I can remember, I think. So David and Susan, we want to thank you for coming, and I really appreciate it. It's a great honor. Now we go after my nephew by marriage. You know, I knew Pat from way, way back. As he said, I used to pick him up hitchhiking and so forth, so on. And I've known him way, way back. He had hair then. He was thin, fairly good looking, because as you grow older, a lot of things changes. And anyway, so we got quite friendly, and I believed in a young man, particularly when I heard he was marrying a Pomerleau girl. I thought that was a good sign of success. So one day he came in and to talk to me and about running for a office. At first, his first idea was governor, and so I said, why don't you go after the big job? So he did. And as I said in the paper, there was only 3 of us that thought that he could win at that particular time. It was Marcel, Pat, and I. And we sure the hell fooled him, didn't we? He's still there. And as the paper said, I do vote Republican many times, but when Pat runs, I vote Democrat.
Thank you.
Pat, thanks for coming. Marcel, all the way from Washington, and I do appreciate it very, very much. So the governor's gone, isn't he? Too bad. I had some good one for him too. But I'll keep him. I'll tell him over the telephone. I haven't forgotten you yet, Ernie. I'll come back. Here comes Charlie. You know, these attorney, when he was talking about, when I was talking, but I talk about something, he puts the meter on. So I always remember the figures. When it's half an hour, he charged me for, 3/4 of an hour. He always, telephone calls and some damn thing like that. So anyway, so Charlie came over and see us at the hotel, and we had a very nice time on a boat, so forth, so on. But every morning, I used to get up and make coffee. And Pat used to come over and have a cup of coffee, and they were next room in our apartment. And so she says, Charlie, why don't you do that? Tony does this all the time for his wife. He says, I promise I will. So anyway, every morning, Pat used to come over to the living room and have coffee. So he came home and he said, so I saw him and I got home. I says, Charlie, I said, do you make coffee for your wife? Yeah, he says, but Jesus, something interesting. So I make coffee. As I was going out, she says, you know Tony Pomerleau. He's trying to figure out whether there's a coffee. Bernie, we go way, way back also. You used to comb your hair the other way when I knew you. You look better, too. When he became mayor, of course, he ran against me as much as poor Paquette. In fact, I asked Paquette who was his neighbor, and he didn't remember. He's his neighbor, of course. So anyway, the Free Press, I started working with him because, after all, it was our city, my city, and I went up to... So I went up. I had never met Bernie. So I went up, had a long talk with him, and I told him, and I says, if it's things that's good for the city, of course I will be for you. So we start working together. And of course, as you know, our political stand is he's up north and I'm down south. You notice I selected the warm weather. And so anyway, we're far, far apart on that, but I figured, well, we still can work together. So the Free Press came out with a picture, he and I, and they said, the odd couple. And so we went along very well, and we did a lot of work, and one particular day, I'm probably, no doubt, I'm positive that I'm the only one that stopped Bernie Sanders head on a track that he didn't know what to say. And that's not normal for him. I was called by our chief, and he said he was going to resign. So I got on a plane and flew home, and I decided to appoint Chief Scully. And I had 3 of it. I'm not too sure that was the right idea, though, after tonight. We all make mistakes sometime, Bernie. So anyway, I had 3 of his people on my board, and I put a muzzle on them. And that bothered the hell out of them. And so I came on, and I appointed Scully, and of course he heard over the radio, and he called me. He was steaming. And he says, you better come in here. He says, you and I are going to have a meeting at 10 o'clock the next morning. So I walked in the morning at 10 o'clock the next morning, and he had the television there and the Free Press and the papers and everybody else, and I thought he and I were just going to have a meeting. So we went in, we had a few words, and I says, I said to him, I did that because the morale of the police department was great, and if I give you a couple of weeks, you're a powerful salesman, and I'd have probably won in the long run, but it'd been a debate, and I got to get back to Florida. So anyway, he says, well, okay, and he was very, very upset. And keep in mind, if you had to vote for me that particular day, I'd have been the last guy in Vermont. So I came out and I said, the guy from the Free Press said, Commissioner, he says, are you going to seek a reappointment of your commission? I says, no. I said, I told the mayor last January that I would not seek a reappointment. But I said, I tell you, if I change my mind, he'll vote for me. Well, he was so surprised, he came right off the ground, he put his hand on my shoulder, he says, God, it's hard to hate this guy, and he turned around and went in. That's the only time I ever had the last word with him. Bernie, thanks for coming in. We've had a lot of fun, a lot of argument. I'm trying to decide who won the most cases or lost, but I guess we're probably even, and we had a great time. And another thing, I think a lot. You can go forever talking about Bernie. We have a hotel that's rather a plush hotel, and all of a sudden I get a telephone call from Congressman that he's in the hotel. He's in our hotel. So he came down to the cabana, and we had a nice talk, and we have a lot of politicians in there. So the next morning, I invited for breakfast. We were having breakfast. So Senator Dole came in, and of course they're in different class and different politics, so they don't know each other. Of course, I deal with everybody, So I told Bob, I says, Bob, come over here, meet our congressman. So he met him, and he went over and have coffee. Then we came back, he whispered to me, have you converted him yet? I said, not yet. And so anyway, after he left, we shook hands, and it was nice seeing him, and Bob Dole said, tell me, what's the story he and Jeffrey? I says, I talked him out of it. He says, you did? He says, why? Well, I said, I'm not too sure whether he could beat Jeffrey or not, and we tried having him in Washington and Burlington. I could think a lot of it, but I guess that's enough, you and I. So thanks for coming down. We really appreciate for the old Scully and the commander. I was going to give you guys a new station. And if I do, you're not going to get the front office overlooking the lake. You'll have an office near the parking lot somewhere. And you, Sonic, thinking that, you know, this man is an undertaker, and he's been after my building. He always thought that would make a tremendous funeral home. I might decide to sell it. We'll wait for you. We'll work over for you. So thanks, everybody. I think it's just wonderful. I all agree. I'm not a bad guy, I guess. We appreciate it, and I'm glad that we were able to do what we could have done for MS. I have to tell you one more thing about Dennis Voigt. He's our accountant. He came in, and I owed him $3,800. So I told the bookkeeper, make him a check for $2,800. So Dennis came in, and he says, "What's $1,000 for?" I said, "You just bought a table." He's right. He's right here, so you know that's right. Another man from way back, when we first came to Burlington, Charlie Ross. He's here. He got distinguished too. He's got gray hair, or white hair, and he was an attorney. So I had rented 4 rooms over the Schulte's cigar store, if anybody can remember that, and I was paying. I never told this to Charlie, but I felt guilty about it, and I figured, well, I got to tell him one of these days, and I thought tonight was a good time. I was paying $50 a month for the 4 rooms, heated and lights. This young man came in, and he says, "I understand you're going to rent one room." And I said, "Yes." He says, "How much are you going to charge us?" I said, $50. So he was paying $50 for the whole thing. Then he was a lawyer quite a while, and he found out there was a better way, honest way to make a living. He went his farming, and so maybe you should go farming too. Look what happened to Charlie. Been very successful at Morgan, raising Morgan horses. So thank you, Charlie. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. And as David Brinkley said, let's clean the parking lot. So thanks a lot. You know, I almost forgot Ernie and the girls. Sit down, you thought you had it. I almost forgot the best part. Anyway, Ernie, you were right. After you're born, things got better as we went along. And we have a good time. And for that, Gracie and Anna Maria, and Anna Maria, I'm your nurse every night. You're going to have a short sheet tonight. So part of it was, I won't tell him about, yeah, I guess I might tell him about the law, about the bet that I won.
But I have to get the microphone after and straighten it out.
Oh, no, your time is up. It's my time. She bet me $1,000. Of course, if I lost, I paid $1,000. And if she lost, she paid only $100. Well, anyway, I went along with that, and she was weighing every day. And, of course, the Brinkleys came in here, and I went out and had some dinner and so forth, so on. And I had to come down 8 pounds. Well, I was almost to the 8 pound. So I brought the scale into my room. And, of course, if you put a scale on a rug, it's about 3 pounds different. So I was 3 pounds under the 192, and she said, "God, I can't believe it, I lost." So you did lose. You didn't tell me I didn't have to weigh on the rug or not. I won my bet. I weighed myself on the same scale.
Cheated her. Cheated her.
I guess I forgot Joe. You know, when Joe is on the tennis court and he wins, that's fine. But then when he starts losing, he starts limping. He limps, and there's something wrong with him. apparently he didn't think he did too well tonight because he's limping to beat hell now. He told me he had to go to Florida at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. I told him about an hour he could leave anytime. Thank you very much. You did a pretty good job, Joe.
I think if I close it quickly, we'll be, you're all done?
Yeah, I'm all done.
Okay. Thanks a million on behalf of MS, on behalf of Tony. God bless you and have a safe trip home. Good night. It's all over.
Glad we were able to do that.